Hi everyone, I'm Chef Susie with Escoffier Online, and this morning we're going to be doing something a little bit different, a little bit fun, kind of almost like a science experiment. We're going to be making ice cream with dry ice. So it's super easy to do. You just need your ice cream base, whatever flavor that you're making, a little bit of dry ice, few pieces of kitchen equipment, and you'll be on your way. So knowing that, let's get started. So for my base, I've actually chosen a raspberry sorbet. I've got all of my ingredients. We're going to mix them together, strain them, then we'll have our base ready to go. So when you're making ice cream or sorbets with dry ice, I highly recommend using something that has a color to it, not a vanilla or a lemon, just in case there's any particles of dry ice in the ice cream itself, then you'll be able to see them. That's why I chose the raspberry. Blackberry is great. Chocolate ice cream is great too. So knowing that, try a few of these flavors and kind of stay away from the vanilla and the lemon if you can. So I just have some fresh raspberries. I've got a little bit of simple syrup. Everything I have here is chilled because we're going to be blending this and straining it, and then it'll be ready to go. Got a little bit of lime juice for some nice flavor, and a little bit of light corn syrup, which is just going to make this just a little bit sweeter. So my simple syrup that I added first to the raspberries, I made it with just some sugar and granulated sugar and water, and I put it on the stove and I let it simmer for about 3 minutes. And I used a 50-50 percentage. It's what you're going to want to use for this recipe, half sugar and half water for your simple syrup. Okay, so I'm just mixing this together, and then we're just going to go ahead and blend this with a little hand immersion blender, and then we'll strain it, and it's going to be ready to go. So please let me know if you have any questions. Once we get the base ready, I'll pull out the dry ice. I've got it in a cooler all tucked away, and I'll show you how to handle it and work with it. Okay, so we're just going to blend this with our immersion blender. You can also do this. You can also do this in your blender. You don't have to use something like this. Kind of get in a little bit of spraying. It's a little more powerful than I thought. Okay, so what you want to do is pretty much blend these raspberries. Let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. And then we're just going to go ahead and strain the mixture. Oh, Chef Susie's making a little bit of a mess here today. Okay, so we've got this strained pretty good. And rather than making any more spraying, we're going to go ahead and strain this. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions on anything. We're going to go ahead and strain our puree, like I said, before Chef Susie makes any more of a mess here. So typically you could do this in a Robocop too, but we're kind of saving that for our ice. And do we have a question? The question is, do you have to use a hand blender? Absolutely not. You can use your home blender, or you can even kind of smash those berries up a little bit with your whisk and then just push them through the sieve, the chinois like I'm doing here. Okay, and you can also use your Robocop too. So you're going to want to push these berries through a little bit and get some of that pulp in there too, and then you will be ready to go. Okay, so we have our nice raspberry base here, and please let me know if you have any questions. What we're going to do is we're going to be setting this aside, and we're going to go ahead and prepare our dry ice. Okay, so what we're going to need is our dry ice, and we're going to have to smash it a little bit, and then we're going to powder it in the Robocop. So I've got my dry ice that I picked up last night. So let's go ahead and take a look. And we have another question. Okay, so back to my dry ice. So I've got my dry ice. I got it last night. I got my dry ice from an ice house that sells mostly ice. And you can also pick it up in a grocery store. Sometimes liquor stores carry them, or also ice cream shops. So go ahead and call some places in your area and see where you can get your dry ice. Since our dry ice is a gas, it's going to be disappearing. So what you're going to want to do is keep it in a small cooler, because if the air gets to it, it's going to help it disappear even faster. So keep it in a cooler. I had mine in this cooler overnight, and I had it wrapped in a blanket, and it was just fine. So let's go ahead and take our dry ice out. Okay. So, super important thing with dry ice, you never want to touch it with your bare hands, because it is very cold. It's a negative 109 degrees, so you don't want to touch it. You can touch it for a few seconds, like for example, if a little piece falls on your hand, you can just go ahead and brush it off, but you don't want to touch it for any amount of time. Okay, so you're going to use some gloves to touch your dry ice. These work perfectly. It's just a little knit glove. This is fine as long as you're not getting wet. But if it's going to be, if there's going to be any moisture, if it's going to be getting wet, you're going to want to use a glove like this that is a little rubberized. So let's go ahead and pull our dry ice out and take a quick look at it. Okay, like I said, I've got it in the cooler here. I had it overnight. It's in a paper bag. Let's take it out. So the smoking that you're seeing is because it's a gas, and it's dissipating in the air. So if you're going to be using 5 pounds of dry ice, you're going to want to probably get maybe 7 or 10 pounds, because it's just going to evaporate overnight. So I've got a few pounds here, so let's take a look at this. And this is exactly what it looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it in a paper bag, and we're going to hammer it a little bit, break up these pieces, then we're going to put it in the Robocop and powder it for our ice cream. So I've got a bag here. We're just going to put a little bit in here, and then we'll go ahead and break it up with a hammer. I think what I'm going to do is, well, I got a couple of bigger pieces here, and we've got a small amount of sorbet, which I recommend making small amounts at a time, so we don't need a lot of ice. Typically, you're going to be using about 3 times the amount of ice for the amount of sorbet, but that's just kind of a gauge. So I like to put mine in a paper bag. You can put it in a plastic Ziploc bag. I've got some towels under my bag on my cutting board, and I'm just going to be putting some towels over just in case the bag breaks, and then you won't have pieces flying everywhere. So this is how I like to break up my ice. So I've got my hammer. I'm going to want to use something sturdy for this. So let's go ahead and break our ice up. So we kind of want to break this into some smaller chunks. And then it's going to go right in the Robocop. So you can feel this breaking up a little bit. You can use the side of your hammer as well. A meat tenderizer will work for this. If you've got a good quality one, if it's plastic, don't use it. It's going to break. Let's go ahead and break these chunks up a little bit more. I can still feel some pretty good sized pieces in here. Okay, I think we're pretty well broken. Okay. All right, that looks perfect so far. Let's go ahead and take a look. Our bag broke a little bit, so it was good that we had our towels on here. I'm just going to put my gloves on just in case. Like I said, be careful with this. It can touch your fingers for just a few seconds, and that's it. Okay, so it's nice and powdery and nice and smoky too. Okay, so we're going to be putting this powder and these chunks in the Robocop, and we're going to make it into a fine powder. So let's go ahead and set this aside. And we've got our Robocop right here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put our dry ice in here, and we're going to powder it. You can use a measuring cup or a little plastic container, whatever you have. Just like I said, be careful not to get this on your hands. It's powdery, but there's still some good sized pieces in here that you're going to want to blend. And please let me know if you have any questions. The question is can you buy dry ice in bags already smashed? Typically it comes in kind of more like sheets, like I showed you, like the larger pieces, but it's super easy to break up. I think with the smaller pieces, it is probably going to kind of evaporate and dissipate a little bit quicker. Okay, so we've got our dry ice in here. So we're just going to pulse this. I usually pulse mine on low to start. Let's go ahead and turn it on. Maybe it's not. Let's see. Oh, hold on, we're having a little bit of an equipment problem. Okay. There we go. So it's on low. Just kind of leave it go. You can go ahead and turn it on high too. And we're just going to be making this into a powder. Okay, let's go ahead and check it out. Oh, we still got some good sized chunks in there. Maybe we've got a little bit too much in here. Let's go ahead and take some out. It's got some pretty good powder on the bottom, so let's take some of these big pieces out of the top. And then we'll get back to our powder. Okay, and please let us know if you have any questions. Let's go ahead. We're going to kind of break this up a little bit, and we'll be back on track. And we have another question.
Can you use a home-sized Cuisinart to break dry ice, or is that too?
The question is can you use a home-sized Cuisinart to break dry ice? Not really sure. This is a KitchenAid, and this is a home version, so I think you'll be okay. And you can do this in your blender too. Let's go ahead and get it on high here. We're getting a lot of those big pieces out of there, and we're making a nice powder. Okay, so it's coming along. Let's see a few more pieces in there, and we'll be ready to go. What you're going to want to do is make sure that your ice is completely dissolved in your ice cream too. Okay, so we've got a nice powder. what we're going to do is take this out of here, and then we're going to go ahead and add it to our sorbet. Okay, so we've got our sorbet. And then we'll just be adding our powder a little bit at a time. Okay, so this is our mixture. You're going to want to make sure this is cold. Then you're going to put it on your stand mixer. You're going to mix this on very low, and you're just going to very carefully add your dry ice powder. Maybe a little spoonful at a time. And it's going to smoke up on you, and it could kind of settle on the bottom. That's a little typical. No worries about that. And typically a mixture this size is going to be taking a few scoops. We've got some in there. We'll check it out. Okay, we just kind of have to wait for our smoke to dissipate a little bit. We'll see how our sorbet is coming along. Okay, it's starting to thicken just a little bit. We've still got a few little pieces in there. Kind of make sure that your mixture is pretty powdery when you're doing this. We'll go ahead and we'll add a little bit more. So we're just going to be adding a little bit at a time until it thickens, and then our sorbet will be ready to go. I'm going to try using our spoon too here to break this up a little bit. It's looking pretty good. Like I said, it's going to take a few spoonfuls to get this thick. And you'll just be amazed. Okay, so that's all it took. Maybe the 4 or 5 spoonfuls of dry ice that I put in here. So we're going to go ahead and set this aside. And our sorbet is perfect. It's ready to go. Okay. So this is our sorbet made with dry ice. Just a few minutes ago, it was nice and liquidy, and our dry ice has thickened it perfectly. You don't want to eat this right away. You want to leave it sit for about 20 to 30 minutes just to make sure there's no dry ice pieces in here, because you cannot eat the dry ice. It's dangerous to the mouth. It's the same way that it's dangerous to the hands. So leave it sit for maybe about 20 or 30 minutes and definitely take a look at it and make sure there's none of those white pieces at all. So if you blend it to a nice powder like I did, takes a couple minutes, then you won't have any of those white pieces. But leave it sit for about 20 to 30 minutes and then you can go ahead and serve it. So let's go ahead and dish up some sorbet that I made earlier. So this is the same recipe, and I made this actually last night, and I let it sit overnight, and it's ready to scoop. So please try making your sorbet and your ice cream with some dry ice and let me know how you do, and do we have any questions on anything? So sorbet is great for the summertime. It's a nice light dessert. So I've got some in my martini glass. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of chocolate sauce on here for a little bit of flavor and some color, and a few raspberries and some mint. So please let me know if you have any questions on working with dry ice. Remember, when you're working with dry ice, always be safe. Don't let the ice touch your hands. And keep in mind that it's negative 109 degrees. And I wanted to thank our good friends at Nadeau's Ice for supplying our dry ice today. So we'll see you next week, and thanks for joining us.